Let's start off with the conference championship games that happened today. As we saw at the beginning of everything, it was Duke beating NC State to win the ACC. If I can get the score up real quick, I'll tell y'all exactly what the score was. Duke beating NC State 76-62. And then the following game after that on ESPN, it was South Carolina blowing out Texas 64-45. And then in the middays, you had UCLA edging out USC and the Juju Watkin-led USC Trojans. And then to close things out, TCU handling against Baylor in the waning minutes of the game, 64-59 to win the Big 12. UCLA winning the Big 10. Out of all those games, Elijah, we saw some great women's college basketball. Like I've said before, this is the golden age era of women's college basketball. But for you, which was your favorite game?
Man, like you said, it was a lot of close ones. And you would think I'll pick the close one to be my favorite, but South Carolina and Texas. And I'm going to say why. Texas, I feel like this. They beat South Carolina earlier in the year. They scored 40 points in the paint. 19 points came off the bench. And Texas led the whole game to dominate in South Carolina that night. So I'm not even going to talk about what they did on the glass because they destroyed them. Today, before we get to today, earlier last week, I want to say, they asked about Oklahoma and Texas coming to the SEC. Dawn Staley said they should have waited because she felt like, there was a rush move by the SEC, and then you got Texas proving her wrong and making her into the championship game. So if she would have lost this game, it would have looked really, really bad on her part to say something like that. But Dawn stood on business, and that's what I really like about that. USC, South Carolina, that's what they call you out there, scored 40 points in the paint today. Never lost the lead. Texas never had the lead. Their largest lead of the game was 21 points. When you talk about dominating, South Carolina dominated. And that's what I like about this game right here because, again, if you're going to talk that talk, you got to walk that walk. And Dawn walked that walk for sure and made sure to say, hey, I know we told you that, you wasn't ready for this conference, and she proved it today. You're not ready for my conference. You're not ready. I'm going to say my conference like I'm her because this has been her conference for the last 3 years. 3-time back-to-back SEC champions, and then she is a back-to-back national champion. So she could talk how she want to talk, and she's backing it up. That's why I picked this game as my favorite, because if you can talk like that, you got to walk like that. And Dawn has proved yet again, this is her conference. This is her time to get – you got to beat me to get to where you want to go. And, again, it's nothing against USC, UCLA, that game, TCU and Baylor, Duke and North Carolina State. Those games are phenomenal. But to me, again, I just like what Dawn did. I like with the team how they responded because of that last loss against Texas, the last time they played them, and they came back and they made sure that we're not going to slip up this time. And I'm happy for the Gamecocks. I'm happy for every woman team that made it there, but I'm happy for the Gamecocks that they were able to pull it out and back up what they were talking about.
Boy, you said a mouthful with all of that, and I like what you mentioned about her standing on business, and that is absolutely true. For me, I felt like this was a game that South Carolina expected to win. Like once you get to a certain point as a program, you more have expectations rather than you believe you can win. Like once you get to that point of we ain't just believing it, but we know we can do it and we expect to do it. That's when you get into a different tier. But for me, my favorite game was the Duke North Carolina State game because Duke was trailing at one point in that game, I believe, by 14 points, and they end up winning the game by 14 points. Aluchi Okanawa has not started a single game in her career. Her freshman and sophomore years, she's played in all of them, but she has not started. But she has been a spark for this team coming off the bench. And she was a spark once again coming off the bench. 22 points and 10 rebounds. The name of the game is to fresh the glass and to play great defense. And it was a couple of stretches in there where Duke was playing some of the best defense out there right now. And they out-rebounded North Carolina State 44-28. So when you're able to do that and you're able to get great scoring from your bench, because that's the part that a lot of people don't talk about. Like, you can get points out of your starters, which for Duke, they had, 9 from Richardson, 6 from Mayer, 2 from Donovan, and 4 from Thomas. and then Jackson, of course, having 22 points. But when you're able to get points from your bench, which you had 22, 6, and 5, so that's 33 points. When you can get that on top of the points that you get from your starters, and then you're able to offset it with great defense. So instead of a player that you're going against, them normally having 25 points, if defensively you can hold them to 16 points, okay, then that's 9 points that you're holding them against. You're holding them away from those 9 points. And the fact that Duke was able to affect the game in such a way and put themselves in a position to where once they got the lead, I think it was somewhere in the third quarter, they went up like 44 to 43, I think it was, or 42, something like that. Once they took that lead, they never gave it back. Like, that's the way that basketball is a game of runs. Everybody's going to go on their runs. You can start off the game on a 20-0 run. That does not mean you're going to win it. And it's not about how you start the game, but it's about how you finish. Now, you mentioned about how Don Staley stood on business, but for Duke, they stood on business just as much. 4 games that they've had this season where they got their lick back. Earlier in the year, they played North Carolina. They lost the game, and then they beat them. Louisville, they played them earlier in the year, and they lost the game. They played them in the quarterfinals, and they beat them. They played Notre Dame earlier in the season, back when I think they were number 1. Notre Dame got the dub. They beat them in the semis to get to the championship, and then they lost to NC State earlier in the year, and they got their lick back. So when you talk about getting what you want and standing on business, Duke was able to do that, and that's why they are the champions of the ACC. Like I said, it was a great Sunday of women's college basketball. This is the type of day where you turn your TV on one channel, maybe 2, and you just let that mug run all day long. That's what we got a chance to see, ladies and gentlemen. And if you are not a fan of women's college basketball, or you're saying that I just don't believe they play good ball, you don't know ball. And I'm here to say that with all of my chest, because, man, you got some superstars in the game right now. Not just your, Juju Watkins, your Paige Beckers, like we know about those. But man, you got some. I mean, you even talk about ones that didn't play in championship Sunday, like a Georgia Amore out of Kentucky, like Hannah Hidalgo out of Notre Dame. Like, bro, this is the golden era of women's college basketball. So we love to see it. And now we're looking forward to Selection Sunday, next Sunday, where we'll probably do something for that, as we're going to be talking and seeing with those ladies where they're going to be seated. And while I'm giving Duke their flowers, they have positioned themselves to probably be a 2 seed now. I think they're positioned ahead of, or they're behind LSU. With LSU getting knocked off in the semis by Texas, do they flip them? The selection committee has a very tough decision. So we'll keep our eyes locked on that, and we'll see what happens when it comes to the NCAA tournament. So now we're going to stay with women's college basketball, and we're going to pose a question. We've seen a lot of good teams play throughout the country. We've seen a lot of teams be the number 1 team in the country. I mean, UCLA had it. Notre Dame had it at one point. Texas is number 1. They're probably not going to be anymore now. South Carolina, I believe, was the number 1 coming into the season. But right now, it feels like it's a toss-up. But for you, Elijah, who is the best team in women's college basketball right now?
I'm going to go the team I just talked about earlier, University of South Carolina. You can't get enough of what Dawn Staley have done with that program. And what I really like is that it's not just one person. It Pow, is that Pow Pow? Pow Pow, I think she's pretty cool. I also like Watkins. She's pretty good as well. But again, it's like it's nothing that you could do to rattle them. I know they had a bad loss against UConn. I know they lost against Texas early in the year. I know they lost against UCLA early in the year. But those are, if you told me that they had to play them again, I'll put my money on South Carolina to probably beat them. Because, again, it's not like it was a game where you'd be like, oh, man, they completely dominated them. UConn dominated them, but South Carolina didn't play their best game. So I want to see how that plays out in the tournament. I know they're on the same side in Birmingham, so they're going to have to see each other again. But again, that team is too complete. There's not one person that can't score a basketball. There's not one person that's not willing to do their job, and that what makes a team dangerous. When somebody is willing to do their job, That's makes it dangerous. You have if you have 4 or 5 stars on the court, that's fine. But if you have probably 3 to 2 stars on the court, but everybody else is role player and they understand their role. Hey, this is my role today. My role is to set the screen and get down to the post, or my role is to set the screen and flank her out to the baseline. So like they know what their role is. And they're not trying to go outside of those means. They're just trying to play the game and they're trying to win a championship. And whatever that happens if they go when they go pro or if they decide to go there or not. That's what I like about South Carolina. They don't have something where Juju Watkins, where we just watching and she could drop 40 every night, but they have 5 girls that's willing, plus 5 and another 3 off the bench that's willing to do their job and get a victory and do it again the next night.
Yeah, man, I'm in total agreement with you that this is South Carolina's world right now, and we're all just living in it. Um, as great of individuals as we're seeing, like a Juju Watkins, like a Hannah Hidalgo, like a Paige Beckers, like an Anissa Moore or Flage, so on and so forth. Man, when you talk about collectively as a team, South Carolina is the ones that are gonna strap things up and play team basketball. So with that in mind, I mean, I'm not going to ramble on with the same things that you just said. Who is the team that you believe can contend with South Carolina the best, that matches up with them the best in a second matchup? Or is it another team that we're not looking at that you think can, potentially be the ones to upset them?
As much as I just gave them praise for 5, for to have 8 girls that can do their job, UConn has the same thing. Paige doesn't have to go for 40 to win the ball game. Paige doesn't have to go for 30 to win the ball game. As you can see, they have Rudd that could score as well. They got Ashley, the freshman down low, that could score as well. So UConn plays the perfect team basketball, and that's because, like I said, Gino has a system as well, and he makes sure that everybody plays within it. So. If those 2 teams meet, I know they're going to meet again in Birmingham. I was hoping they met on the opposite side of the bracket in Tampa for a championship game, because I think that's the way that I would love to see it go. But UConn to me is their biggest threat. It's not USC. No, I'm sorry, Juju Watkins, but you're not going to beat them with one player. I would say UCLA, but I think they got UCLA. I think they'll get them the next time. So again, it's just UConn. I think UConn Huskies will be their biggest challenge.
Yeah, I think UConn definitely will give them a lot of trouble once again, because UConn has, I think, the number 4 scoring defense in the country. But I'm looking at a team like UCLA that has Lauren Betts, that when they played that last time, she had 11 and 14. And again, like we said earlier, or like I said earlier, the name of the game is defense and rebounds. And they out rebounded South Carolina by 7 in that game. And it's mainly because of the work that Lauren Betts did down low. It goes without saying, especially in women's basketball, to have a good post player, one that can work moves, one that can also be a 3-level scorer if she's athletic enough or has enough of a good jump shot to be able to do so. But it goes without saying, bro, if you can't have somebody that can clang and bang down low and can get rebounds with the best of them, you don't have a really good chance at being able to compete for anything. Because if the team you're playing is able to get the ball and rebound it and get an extra possession, then you're not getting a chance to score. And then if they're able to get the rebounds off your missed shots, then you're not getting a chance to score. So I think the way that UCLA played against them earlier in the season, now it was very early. I think it was in November. So I mean, that was right out of the gate within the first 10 games of the season. So right now, this is a completely different team. Both sides are completely different teams. Obviously, the fact that they are both conference champions says a lot about the trajectory of where they were going to be from the beginning of the season to now at this point. But what I love so much about Don Staley in South Carolina is that they ain't ducking no smoke. Out of the top 10 teams in the country, the only 2 that they haven't played is Duke and USC. Everybody else, they done played them. NC State, LSU, Oklahoma, UCLA, UConn. Like, you got to be the best, you got to beat the best. Like, they gonna schedule the best. They're not finna schedule the cupcake schedule. They're not trying to get these games where they're paying them or they're trying to build chemistry. They are trial by fire, because if you don't win the big games, how can you win the big games? And that's what I love about the team. like I said, I think UCLA can give them a little bit of trouble, especially when it comes to crashing the glass. But right now, man, it's like I said, me and Elijah both saying this. This is South Carolina's world, and we're all just living in it. So we'll see what happens. Again, like we said, Selection Sunday will be this upcoming Sunday, as this episode is now dropping here on a Monday. And we'll see where everyone is seated. We'll see how all the matchups will fall, and just enjoy how March Madness is going to roll, because we're talking about women's college basketball. We'll have the men coming up pretty soon as well.